Tim, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone else for attending and taking the time to listen to our and other stories. So first of all, we will talk here about oncology and autoimmune diseases and the cancer patient's immune system. Next slide, please. My forward-looking statement. Next one. Few key highlights which are important to understand. So Immutep is pioneering the cancer immunotherapy space, especially. We are active on a global scale, so in Australia, in Europe, and in the United States. So we are addressing major markets. We have a portfolio of different drugs, 2 in immuno-oncology and 2 in autoimmune diseases. And we have been pioneering in the last years, and we will continue to do so in the future, LAG-3, which is one of the big immune checkpoints. So one of the triggers in our immune system with which you can boost the immune system or bring the immune system back into the right balance. So we are excellently positioned with a variety of different clinical trials. We have been presenting great data in the last year at some of the biggest oncology conferences globally. We have also a great level of support. Our institutional ownership is round about 57%, with, for instance, Fidelity being a substantial holder. We are well funded with more than 68 million Australian dollars end of last quarter. And that's very important to mention. We have also very good connections to the big pharmaceutical industry. So we actually teamed up with a number of global players. You can see here the logos, for instance, from Merck in the US, Merck Germany, Pfizer, Novartis, GlaxoSmithKline, and other players. Next slide, please. Our board and management is, I believe, also a strength of the company. Our chairman, Russell Howard, has experience in the United States as well as in Australia in the biotech business. Pete has been a co-head of healthcare investment banking at Deutsche Bank, and Lucy Turnbull, I believe most of you know. Also, I would like to mention Frédéric Tribel. He actually discovered LAG-3 and is the worldwide leading scientist, immunologist, and oncologist, and has been paving the way for cancer immunotherapy since years. Also, of course, I should highlight Dean Miller, our Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel. And then we have a number of other directors, department heads with industry experience. So it's a great fundament and a great team to work with. Next slide, please. And here you can see our assets, our pipeline. So on top, you see eftilagimod alpha. That's clearly the flagship of our portfolio. Eftilagimod alpha is tested in different cancer indications, such as non-small cell lung cancer, head and neck cancer, metastatic breast cancer. So we are really focusing on high unmet medical need. We try to provide benefits to patients, and we do that in collaboration with the big pharmaceutical industry. Because in every industry, you should team up with your customer. And naturally, for biotech, the customer is big pharmaceutical industry players such as Merck, such as Pfizer, and others. We actually have been out-licensing 2 of our 4 programs, one in oncology to Novartis, an exclusive worldwide licensing agreement. So all the different clinical trials you see here are conducted by Novartis, paid for by Novartis, under their control, and we collect milestone payments, and if the product is registered, royalties, so a percentage of the revenues. Same model applies to GlaxoSmithKline, where we out-licensed years ago a so-called depleting antibody in autoimmune diseases. And we have another drug positioned in autoimmune diseases called IMP 761, the world's first agonist to autoimmune diseases, to LAG-3 position autoimmune diseases. So it's cutting edge science, preclinical stage, very exciting. But overall, you see that we have a number of different approaches. So we are not a single drug company. We have multiple different drugs, well-balanced portfolio. We collaborate with the big pharmaceutical industry. Next slide, please. And it's very important to understand that most of the presentation will focus on immuno-oncology, that as I speak, our immune system, our immune surveillance is working and naturally protects us against cancer. However, unfortunately, it's not under every circumstance 100% efficient. And once you have cancer, cancer tries to hide itself and to protect itself. And what we try to do is to bring the immune system back, to restore the power of the patient's own immune system. And on the next slide, you can see how we do that with our lead drug, eftilagimod alpha. So we give the immune system a broad push. Eftilagimod is a unique asset which leads to activation of the dendritic cells and monocytes, if you like, the generals of the immune system, informing the killer cells, the soldiers of the immune system, the T cells, whom to attack, and also drafting new soldiers. And we also see the kickoff of the interferon gamma cascade. So in other words, also compared to other immuno-oncology approaches, a very broad activation of the patient's immune system. And we have been demonstrating that in vitro and in vivo, and we can measure this effect also in patients. And on the next slide, you see that this is not only important for patients, but also a big commercial opportunity. Another immuno-oncology drug called Keytruda alone is making more than $20 billion annually. So it's a substantial opportunity in immuno-oncology for the anti-PD-1s. Keytruda is a so-called anti-PD-1, so it's not addressing LAG-3, but PD-1, another checkpoint. And also anti-PD-L1s are making billions and billions of dollars. So if you are successful, if your data is good, there is also a bright commercial future. The next slide. You can see actually that we have been getting quite a lot of attention in the last year. And I believe we have the chance also in 2023 to be very well recognized. So on the left-hand side, you see a picture out of the SITC conference in Boston, took place in November last year. Around about 3,000 people in the room listening to our presentation. We actually have been announcing first-line non-small cell lung cancer data in an abstract, which was also officially featured in the media conference as 1 out of 9 abstracts out of 1,500 by the SITC official media conference. On the right-hand side, it's a conference called ESCO in Chicago in June, where we also have been having a big audience. Now, what did we present? On the next slide, you can see that we presented data, so-called overall response rate, so tumor shrinkage of the patients, where we doubled the response rate of Keytruda, the drug I've just been showing with more than 20 billion annual sales. And also we have been prolonging the time until, unfortunately, most of the patients are progressing again. This is a reality in oncology. So we are doubling the effects of the top-selling drug in oncology and make more patients eligible to anti-PD-1 treatment when we combine eftilagimod with anti-PD-1. On the next slide, you can see that we are also going beyond first-line non-small cell lung cancer, which is clearly a center of gravity and the most important cancer indication, if you look at the numbers, which we have in the field, but we are active also in head and neck cancer. Same results. Again, we doubled what you would typically expect. Also metastatic breast cancer and now triple negative breast cancer. And we have different other clinical trials looking at other solid tumors. On the next slide. You can see here a clinical trial, which is very important. A trial which is now recruited more than 50%. It's called TACTI-003, looking at first-line head and neck cancer, a terrible disease, high suicide rate of the patients because it goes along with often with the deformation of the face. So invisible patients, they don't go out anymore. So to make that a change and to provide some benefits for the patients is very important. And this trial, we believe, will be fully recruited by mid of this year. So in the second half of this year, we should see top-line data. And as it is a so-called randomized clinical trial, so a controlled clinical trial, This data will be very important. We conduct this trial in collaboration with Merck. And again, it's a combination of Keytruda with eftilagimod. On the next slide. This is also very exciting. We teamed up with Merck and Pfizer 2 times. On the left-hand side, you see previous results. They have been published, very exciting. And this has been leading to the next step. So we will start in first half of this year, if everything runs according to plan, with a clinical trial together with Pfizer and Merck, who are also providing funding. So not only drug supply, but also cash on the table. So we will run the clinical trial called INSIGHT 005, looking at urothelial cancer and combine it with a marketed drug from Merck and Pfizer called Bavencio. And it's within the commercial sweet spot of Bavencio. So very exciting as well. On the next slide. In metastatic breast cancer, here you can see, I don't go into detail in the interest of time, but here you can see that we can measure in patients that an improved immune status leads in a statistically significant way to an improved overall survival of patients. So the more we boost the immune system, the better those patients will do. And on the next slide, you will finally see that we have hopefully a great year 2023 ahead of us. Multiple different data readouts. I mentioned TACTI-003. Also other data points will come fairly quickly. We are discussing with the regulatory authorities. The FDA gave us fast-track designation, for instance, for non-small cell lung cancer last year. So there's a lot to expect. We are well funded. We will move ahead, and I hope you will hear from us during 2023 multiple times. And with that, I stop here, Tim.
Thank you, Marc. I might add, you're coming to us from Berlin, and it's about 2:30 in the morning, so we appreciate your time. You just touched on, it's been tough for biotechs out there, and you just touched on your strong cash position, your balance sheet. Can you talk to that and discuss how, you know, that the cash is expected to, how long it's supposed to last? I think it's probably into the first half of 2024, and how you'll kind of allocate that appropriately so it kind of runs through to forecast.
Yeah, so first of all, indeed, as you said, we are well funded and have a very good level of support. Our currently anticipated cash reach is till mid of calendar year 2024. So the financial year 24 should be fully covered. And we are investing for most into our clinical development. So the TACTI-003 clinical trial with results in second half of this year is funded, as well as the clinical trials which we are planning to kick off, soft tissue sarcoma, running clinical trials, for instance, TACTI-002, and our general operations. So there's quite a lot to expect, and I hope that we deploy our cash wisely.
Mm-hmm. I think when we last spoke in November, you kind of spoke about a pipeline into China with partners. Can you give us a little bit more color on that?
Yeah, indeed. We have for eftilagimod a partner in China. They are fully funding everything which is going on in China for eftilagimod alpha. It's EOC Pharma. And also there, we hope for significant steps forward during the course of this year. So it's a good and important and a collaboration, and we are actually interacting quite a lot.
There's a question that's just come in. To what extent are big pharma partners and helping to fund some of your trials?
It's a good question, because often big pharma is supplying only a drug and gives good advice. But in our case, we have been able to achieve partnerships where part of the work is under control and also being paid for. For instance, US Merck paid for so-called biomarker data. And in our last partnership with German Merck and Pfizer, they are also funding a part of the study. So it's cash involved. It's a very active collaboration with the different parties. And it's, of course, very important to build these relationships over time.
And Marc, a couple more questions. Which indication for EFTI are you most excited about?
Well, that's a difficult one because we actually delivered with the anti-PD-1 combination always in a very good way in non-small cell lung cancer and head and neck cancer, also not to forget about melanoma, for instance. So what you can see there more or less consistently is that we typically double the tumor shrinkage, which you would typically expect with Keytruda alone.
And Marc, finally, can you tell us a little bit more about your position in the autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had time to talk about that much. It's quite exciting because it's cutting-edge technology. Our preclinical asset, IMP761, we have been successfully manufacturing it, GMP compliant. We press released at end of last year. So we hope to finish so-called IND-enabling studies so that we are ready from a preclinical point of view for clinical development, first-in-man studies, which should hopefully start early next year.
Thanks, Marc. I believe you're in Australia in a couple of weeks' time. Hopefully, we'll see you then. Get some sleep.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.